This time around, Stuart, we're talking about really the effects of not being able to hear very well. So welcome.
Thank
Always
you.
good to see you.
Great to see you, Ken.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so, one of the things that we're really focused on, in being in the ear, there's a lot of sensitivity in the ear.
Yes.
There's a lot of things we can measure and a lot of other things we can do besides just help people to hear better. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later, of course. But falling is a big deal. It's a really big deal. Like every 11 seconds, somebody is seen in an emergency room for falling. Basically, only half the people that fall tell somebody.
Right.
Because they don't want to say, oh, I fell, They're nervous what their kids will think or their friends will think. So there's a lot of ramifications to that, So, when you have hearing loss, you're more likely to fall. Don't ask me how that's related.
Yeah,
These people come up with these studies.
No,
but it's pretty darn accurate.
It's not as though, if I'm understanding this, when you're congested, when you have a cold, because your inner ear, your equilibrium can be off for a few days, and you can get a little
that's
dizzy.
not it, yeah.
But this isn't it at all.
This is just pure hearing loss without any kind of other effects.
Wow.
And so, I think you're 30% more likely to fall even if you have a mild sensorineural hearing loss. So it's a big thing. So, one of the aspects of this new technology that we have that you wear, right on your ear is a fall detection system.
Right.
So when you fall, it sends out a pre-designated message to your contacts, up to 3 different contacts. So they know you fell, so they can get back in touch with you and, see how you're doing, what's going on, if you need help, obviously. If, you don't respond, you're not near your phone or, you can't get up or whatever, then it sends out, it geotags where you're at.
Okay.
So they know where to send help or come over and check you or something like that. And, here, just a quick story, not too long ago at a Christmas, we had a gentleman's hearing aid that came back from repair. And we tried to call him to pick it up, didn't answer. And, my son, Brandon, said, you know what, I live right down there. Let me just run by, So he runs by. The guy's been on the floor for 2 days.
Oh, my God.
So he gets on his cell phone, calls 911, and, gets him in there. The guy could hear for Christmas, but he could also, get up and get help that he needed. And so people do this, and nobody ever thinks they're going to fall. It's always going to be somebody else,
Let me ask you something about the hearing aids
Sure.
with the fall detection and they call. Do they must be linked with your phone or they have their own GPS built in?
So it has to be linked with the phone.
Okay, all right.
Which they're done, right in our office,
right,
even before they
okay.
leave. So
all right.
It's a pretty automatic thing.
Yeah.
So, it's important, it's important stuff. So we're starting to look at the overall health of the individual and see how we can live into that to help them, in these different aspects of their life as well. So
now, another aspect of, I think is an obvious one, is loneliness. Yeah.
That's right. So, boy, have we heard this, forever, and loneliness is a big epidemic. Yeah, and it's an epidemic because obviously people are living longer, they're living in different facilities, right? But you don't have to be isolated to where you're all by yourself in a corner to be lonely.
Yeah.
You can be right in the middle of a party, right? And not even be able to talk to anybody. And that's even kind of more depressing, if you will, because it's like, gosh, I'm here and I can't even have a conversation, And so, that's what we're trying to overcome, right? Is get them to where they're hearing better, they're communicating better, they're more active, they're more social. If people are stronger, they fall less. All this stuff just starts to work into the same focus, which is keeping somebody as healthy as they possibly can and living into their best potential.
Yeah, and the other one here is obvious, hearing a noise, but this is just the everyday stuff, obviously, in your house. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day, cooking. When you cook, the sounds of what you're doing is very key. If you're hearing something sizzle or something like that, or, you put something on the stove and you hear it, you can tell, okay, it's gone from a simmer to a boil. If you're not standing there right by your pan, I'm not saying you should be, you got to be safe, but you could be turning around in the kitchen chopping something up, and then all of a sudden you hear it and you go, okay, it's time to do this. But just cooking alone, hearing all those sounds is, you hear the timer go off, whatever it might be.
There's so many things like that, Ken. You're so dead on right there. It's there's so much sound around us that's so subtle. We have some people mention, they say, well, gosh, I don't want to wear my hearing aids at home. I'm not really talking to anybody.
Yeah.
we say, oh my gosh, that's such a big mistake. You know, you need to wear them all the time to constantly stimulate that auditory system in your brain so that when you do want to hear better, then you're at such a higher level of performance, you can differentiate the little subtleties of those soft-spoken speech sounds and hear and understand conversation so much more clearly. And those environmental sounds, you know, like cooking, you know, or the refrigerator, or the water overflowing someplace.
And that's something, there's no way you can hook up to something and have it vibrate like a doorbell or whatever. It is what it is.
That's right. I mean, there are doorbells, when the doorbell rings, they flash and those types of things. But for the most part, you just want to hear them, you know? And that's what people want to do, is just to be more average or more normal, you know, in their conversations and in their interaction. And, you know, that's important. So, you know, then you take that to a whole different level, you know, of hearing and noise, right? Stuart, I could never hear in a restaurant, you know? I mean, in my 35 years, you know how many times I've heard that?
Right.
I mean, so many. It's, you know, obviously a noisy place is harder to hear than a quiet environment like this is, right?
Yeah.
You know, this is nice and quiet, we can do just fine. But, you know, when you're in noise, there's that signal to noise ratio we're always looking at and trying to reduce the noise and enhance the speech to give you a favorable ability to understand the speech more clearly. So, you know, now with this new Livio Edge AI product that's just come out, all you do is tap it, and it replays the last 15 seconds of what you heard in a few milliseconds, and then rewinds it, screens the noise, and gives you the speech much clearer. I mean, that's
amazing.
Artificial intelligence at work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really amazing.
Yeah.
So I mean,
all within
and it sounds great.
Wow.
So hearing and noise is a big deal. You know, we have technologies that are getting better and better all the time. You know, you couple that with everything else that goes on in the hearing systems, you know, it's been a fantastic opportunity for us to really move people forward in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and again, like you said, even around your house, if you're alone, how important having those hearing aids
Really important. Yeah, we've got to keep everybody on the air.
Yeah.
And stop them from falling.
Right. As far as the different hearing aids go, you know, I know there's all different levels.
Yep.
And whatever might be right for someone, they might be at the start of maybe somewhat a hearing loss, so they may not need, they can still hear somewhat or hear fairly well.
You bet.
But I've said this before, my father-in-law was in that situation and got hearing aids. But when he's out and about, he's in a restaurant, muffled sounds, he could hear, but not really like focus on everything that was going through. At home, he was fine.
Yep.
But there's a very good example.
That's right. So, I mean, you know, a lot of people say, well, I hear you just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said, you know what, if it was as quiet as this is in my office, we're this close together, we're paying attention, you know, if the world were like this, you'd hear everywhere you go, but you don't, you know, and that's why you're here today, is you're struggling. So we give them speech and noise tests, and boy, their understanding ability goes right, you know, through the floor.
Right.
You know, they're understanding 35, 42%, you know, you can't have a conversation if you're only understanding less than half of what people are saying, right?
Right.
So you need to get that way up, you know, in that over that 80 percentile.
And we were talking, I think, once before about this, how we're beginning to see younger folks because of the earpods and things like that, and they're playing things at a higher volume, or even if they're not at a real high volume, it's right there. The speakers are in your ears.
Yeah. Well, that and the longevity, right?
And the longevity.
They're wearing the darn things all day long.
Right,
yeah. You know, it's like, my God, like they're implanted there practically, right? So that's the big deal. So teen hearing loss is way up, you know, so, you know, on those smartphones, you know, there's a way to go into settings and limit the loudness. So I would encourage any parent or grandparent that can get a hold of their phones to limit that. You know, you can put it down 75%, and it's still plenty loud.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not that earth-shattering, you know, volume that you really don't need.
Right.
So, you know, and sometimes if people are just turning it up and listening to music, you know how you're driving home, you're in your car, you know, the volume's at a certain level, you get back in the morning, it's like, oh my gosh, that's so loud.
Yes.
We just get used to that, right? So they get used to it as well, and they keep cranking it up. You know, they just need to have a limit so that just subliminally, you know, that's already taken care of for them so it doesn't get that high. Yeah,
and of course, you know, one of the things that I read about recently is, you know, one of the, you know, the singers, the rock and rollers and all, who was huge during the 80s and 90s, has severe hearing loss primarily from the concerts that they would play at.
That was probably Huey Lewis,
Huey
right?
Lewis, yeah.
Yeah, that was, he was tied into Starkey, right? He was thanking Starkey on the Today Show. about all the work they've done with him. And I mean, basically, in his career.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and it was just good old rock and roll, right?
Right.
Having fun and jamming out there on the stage.
And the funny thing was, they weren't like a big hair band. Yeah. They weren't like, Kiss or something like that. Right. His stuff was,
pretty tame, right?
Pretty tame.
Yeah, but loud.
But back then, of course, unlike now, if you remember going to concerts, they would have the big amplifiers all on stage, walls of amplifiers behind them.
Yeah.
Plus their monitors.
You could feel it, right?
Yeah.
You feel
that's
the music.
what you wanted.
Of course. Of course. I remember.
Little did we know.
Yeah.
All right. What are your hours over there?
So we're 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. If you need to come in earlier or later, we're happy to see you.
Okay. Always good to see you.
Great to see you too, Ken.
Take care. We'll be right back.